Story 1. Someone once told me my voice is so calm and soothing. My voice was always an insecurity to me, so that compliment was nice. Story 2. I was visiting my brother in Mumbai, India. While looking at a dress for my wife, I really liked one. I realized I did not have cash, and the shopkeeper, it was a temporary setup by the roadside, did not accept credit cards. I had a return ticket for the next day, so I reluctantly decided not to buy the dress. For some reason, the shopkeeper asked me to take the dress anyway. I told him I don't have enough cash. He said, "Bring the money tomorrow." I said, "I am flying out tomorrow, so I may not have the time to come back." He said, "Bring the money when you come next year." I was seriously floored. I could not believe he trusted me enough that he would let me take merchandise without some sort of guarantee that I would pay him. He insisted that I take the dress and pay him back whenever I could. He took no name, no phone number, nothing from me as a guarantee of payment. He said, "I know you are an honest man and you will pay me." Story 3. I used to work as an art teacher for kids from ages 3 to 10. Once, in one of the schools where I worked, I noticed the small kids started a rumor about me. I would see the girls giggle, whisper, and look my way. One day, one of the girls walked up to me and said she wanted to ask me a question. I said sure, and she very shyly whispered in my ear, "Is it true you're a secret mermaid?" It was just the cutest thing ever. Story 4. This compliment changed my life/way of thinking. My father was not a good person. Amongst other things, he was also an ultra-competitive parent and used me to fulfill his childhood losses, such as winning martial art tournaments he never could when he was younger. Despite loathing the routine, I was quite good and earned my black belt at a young age as I practiced taekwondo, judo, jiu-jitsu, weapon training, and range practice. One day at a judo competition, I failed to execute a proper fall and I snapped my arm. The bones in my forearm dislodged and pushed up halfway up my upper arm. He didn't ask if I was okay. He drove me to the hospital and said nothing. When he got home, he took away my TV and phone and gave me a lights-out curfew at 7. I was in a cast for 3 months and couldn't perform or exercise for about half a year, so my body grew weak. When I got back, I got my ass kicked during sparring. I was bleeding and had a chunk of hair pulled out. I came out of the bathroom and Mr. Kennedy, a father of one of the elementary students, asked me why I was crying. I said because all I do is fight and I don't know how to feel beautiful when I look like this every day. He said to me while I continued to wipe dried blood from my cut lips, "There is nothing more beautiful than resilience. You are beautiful in every way. Every day my daughter comes to class. I am lucky she can look up to someone as strong as you." I couldn't believe what I heard. My whole body felt numb, and then 1,000,000 pounds of emotions blew up from my heart. I started to silently sob oceans. Somehow, I knew that he knew what I was going through. He asked if he could give me a hug. As I cried in the arms of a different father that day, I promised myself I would stand up to my own father. I told my dad that night if he wanted a daughter, he better treat me like one. He refused, and I left my house at 17. I have never regretted it. Mr. Kennedy was kind to me for 5 minutes, and it was all I needed to know what a real father was like. Story 5. When my wife and I first started dating, we came home from some sort of late morning or afternoon event. She flopped down on the bed, and, as is right and proper, I walked over and hopped on the bed from the footboard to kiss her. She put her hand on my chest to stop me, looked me straight in the eye, and said, "You're so handsome. Oh my God. I hope it's the last thing I think of before I die." Story 6. During a fight with my husband, which was caused by my low self-worth issues, he said, "Don't you realize that you are the only thing in this world that makes me want to be a better person? Don't you realize you are the reason I want to be more like you?" The fight stopped and I just sobbed. Story 7. I'm not sure it's the nicest thing, but professionally, it was. My senior year of college, a reasonably famous professor in his field told me that the only undergraduate class he shared his real research with was mine. It was only because he wanted to hear my opinion and questions on his papers and presentations before submitting them for publication or going to a conference. I was so flattered I added it as a second major. I still do research with him to this day. Story 8. My piano teacher in college said, after playing the first and second movements of Beethoven's Moonlight. I think that is how he would have wanted that played. Yeah, that was a good day. Story 9. A girl once told me, "You are one of the very few men I know that respect women." And that was simply amazing. I felt like what I worked so hard at, being a man with value and character, came to fruition. I believe what she saw differently is that I saw her for who she was and recognized her as a human being, not an alien woman being who's only worthy if beautiful. I looked her in the eye when she spoke, never patronized her even if she said anything dumb, especially because she was insecure about feeling stupid. I explained things gently, never interrupted her speech, took her physical and mental problems seriously, walked her to the bus stop every time she had to go home and waited until the bus arrived. I never made inappropriate jokes around her or about her, never cursed around her, and so on. I did that consciously, so the compliment made me feel on top of the world, 100 times better than compliments on my looks. Story 10. I was training to be a medic in the Army, and part of my training was to work in a hospital for a month in various areas. One day, I was working with an anesthesiologist during surgery. For the most part, there isn't much they have to do unless something goes wrong. He brought in a physiology book to quiz my knowledge. I knew the answers to almost every question he asked, and after one answer about the function of a specific part of the kidney, the surgeon stops what he was doing, looks at me and says, "Why the hell is the Army wasting its money to make you a medic? They should send you to med school." That was over 10 years ago, and it still makes me smile anytime I think about it. Story 11. I had just braided my hair into 8 braids when a girl with far more impressive braids squealed and said she loved my hair. Story 12. As an after-school tutor, I still fondly remember a student saying something to the effect of, "Why are you out here and not teaching this actually in school?" I've never heard this explained so clearly in my life. As a self-published author, I literally went and printed out one of the most gushing reviews a book of mine ever received, and I leave its printout near where I do my writing to keep me going even through the toughest writer's block days. Oh, and one time a couple of months back, a cute barista at the local coffee shop told me I look really good in the shirt I was wearing. Still riding that high, too. Story 13. I was walking upstairs in an IKEA wearing a striped shirt and black dress when this sweet lady said to me, "I love your outfit. It brings a smile to my face and brightens my day." Man, I grinned so hard. She made my day. I didn't even get a good look at her. Thank you, random lady, for being so nice. Story 14. On a date, I was told that I articulate myself well, and they liked the way I express my thoughts. I overthink everything and find myself revisiting conversations and what I should have said. So, to hear that from someone I thought highly of was cool. Story 15. My old school Italian father, slowly dying in pain, was eventually put into an induced coma. Days before he died, he woke up at one point, reached for my hand and said, "My beautiful boy, don't be here when death comes." He was not one for words or expressing himself, but I have always remembered that moment. Story 16. "You were the only person who stuck up for me," said to me years later by a fellow graduate student who was being bullied by a professor. The bullying was so bad the student ended up in the hospital. The university did nothing to help her. In retaliation, the university cut my funding so that I wasn't able to finish my degree, but still, I managed to get an amazing career in the field. Story 17. My long eyelashes and blue eyes. I'm a man, so the compliment about my eyelashes surprised me at first. My wife was a little jealous until it passed on to our daughter. She was definitely okay with that. Story 18. In high school, there was a girl everyone made fun of. She had some really unfortunate acne. One day, I witnessed the mean girls taking her down a peg. I decided, as a well-liked guy, to use my power for good, and made an effort to chat publicly with her every day at lunch. Flash to 10 years later, after my mother's death, and I was cleaning out her bedroom. I found a card in my mother's drawer sent to her by this girl. It was a thank you card, and inside it said, "Your son is the one drop of brightness in an otherwise dreary world. Thank you for teaching him to color outside the lines." Something about that compliment, and the idea that my mother had held on to it for so long, I found touching. Story 19. Then girlfriend, now wife, went with me to a doctor's appointment. The doctor was trying to do the usual, blame me for not doing something instead of actually trying to fix the problem. My girlfriend said something to the effect of, "I know this man, and if he says he did something, you can take that to the bank." Felt nice. Story 20. I was shopping with my kids when they were maybe 7 and 14. A woman stopped me and said she was a teacher. She said she was very impressed with how I delegated to them and complimented me on my parenting. I wish I had handed her a $10 bill. By the way, the kids are amazing adults. Story 21. My friend, years back, told me that just by being around me, I helped her love herself and taught her how to do it freely, no matter what other people thought. Story 22. I was out on a date. We were talking about makeup. He asked me if I was wearing makeup. I said no. He was like, "Oh my God, you are so beautiful." Story 23. When I was about 12, my stepmom said that she didn't know how I turned out to be such a good kid considering how loony my biological parents were. Story 24. A guy I was dating at the time. We were sitting in his car, listening to music and watching the stars and having random conversations. There was quite a bit of silence for a minute or two, and he looked at me and said, "You are the most beautiful person I've ever met." He said it so softly and it felt genuine. My whole life I've never felt good enough, and no one has ever said something to me like that before, and it made me feel so seen and appreciated. I don't talk to this guy anymore, but it was the sweetest thing anyone has ever said to me, and I'm forever grateful. Story 25. If you were a combination of Lord of the Rings characters, you would be Aragorn and Samwise. My nerdy little soul will ride that high until I die. Story 26. I have this specific button-up shirt that I love. It's a mesh material, so I wear it to the theme parks a lot. One time, an employee stopped me just to say that she loved the shirt and that it looked good on me. A very small compliment, but it really boosted my confidence and made me feel like I was the hottest person in town. Story 27. In a public speaking class, I humorously introduced myself in a speech by saying, "I like the sound of my own voice," and the professor immediately responded with, "And so do we." As someone who has struggled with feeling like what I have to say is worth hearing, that really stuck with me. Story 28. My Nana told me that I made her feel safe. Hearing that from my favorite person, and the person that I felt the exact same way about, pretty much made my entire life. Story 29. "You look like a princess," said to me by my young son years ago. I was wearing a flowy dress with strappy silver sandals. Story 30. I had always been a shy and introverted person, content with blending into the background and avoiding any kind of attention. Growing up, I never craved compliments or praise, and was satisfied with living a simple and quiet life. However, one day, I received a compliment that not only surprised me but also changed the way I saw myself. I was in my final year of high school and had been selected to give a speech at our graduation ceremony. I was nervous but determined to do my best, as this was my chance to leave a lasting impression on my classmates and teachers. As I stood on the stage, sweating and fidgeting, I could feel the eyes of the entire auditorium on me. But as I began to speak, the words seemed to flow effortlessly, and I could sense the captivation of the audience. By the end of my speech, I was met with thunderous applause that sent shivers down my spine. As I walked off the stage, still trembling from the adrenaline rush, my English teacher approached me with tears in her eyes. I was taken aback, thinking I must have made a mistake or said something wrong in my speech. But instead, she hugged me and whispered in my ear, "You have a gift, my dear. Your words have the power to move and inspire people. Never doubt your ability again." Those words stuck with me, and it was the biggest and nicest compliment I had ever received. I was humbled and overwhelmed with emotion, coming from a teacher who had always been tough and rarely gave praise. That one compliment made me realize the impact I could have with my words, and it gave me the confidence to break out of my introverted shell. Since that day, I have continued to push myself and embrace new challenges, knowing that my words have the power to make a difference. And every time self-doubt creeps in, I remember that compliment and it gives me the strength to keep going. It may seem like a small moment, but to me, it was the turning point that shaped my self-esteem and my future. I will always be grateful for that one kind and meaningful compliment that changed my life. Story 31. A friend said to me recently, "You know what I see when I look at you?" And he started showing me pictures of Marilyn Monroe and putting them next to my face. It was the tone of his voice and the look on his face that made it feel genuine. I was floored, and I will never forget that moment. Story 32. As someone who is very insecure, someone in high school told me I was beautiful, and sometimes I just remember that. It makes me feel good for a good second. Story 33. I was in Italy, and a nun looked at me and said, "God knew what he was doing when he made you." For the first time, I was dressed in very nice, fancy clothing, and I had a very trimmed beard and braided hair. That one comment still makes me feel at the top of the world.